This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
We also welcome our returning celebrity guest, host and creator of the Best Picture cast, our second most frequent guest, Kieran B.
It's great to hear the warm welcome applause. This is several times I've been here, and 12 or so episodes when I made my debut and first got off the train here at the Gmote station. I got a lot of dirty looks, and I wasn't sure if I would be welcome back or even if they'd let me leave. It's glad to still be invited back to these things, and that you guys have at least gotten used to me a little bit here.
Yeah, you've decided to forego all of these modern films that you've recently been discussing with us. Go back to the old favorites, the old classics, the 50s, 40s, etc. films this year. I think you have one from 45, one from 1940, one from 1955, and then we sneak one in there from 2000, but we won't talk about that one.
Yeah, well, this is a little more comfortable for me. This is where I like to be. I like to be in that 40s, 50s range here. The episodes no one else wants out there. The cats on the hot tin roofs and the Shanes and the bad days at Black Rock. So.
Oh, and what was the other one? The Billy Wilder film, Stalag 17.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite stays here. That and Gran Torino are probably two of my favorite episodes we did here. So.
I still love the Lost in Translation one. That one was such a gem I was not necessarily expecting. Partially because of how much my mother hates that movie. But
I know.
We digress.
Did she hate that film when she saw it?
But let's get right into it. Tonight for our 244th episode, we discuss Bad Day at Black Rock, celebrating its 70th anniversary this week. Directed by John Sturges, written by Millard Kaufman and John McGuire, music by Andre Previn, starring Spencer Tracy as John J. McCready, Robert Ryan as Reno Smith, Anne Francis as Liz Worth, Dean Yeager or Jager, I don't know, it could be a soft J, as Sheriff Tim Horton, Walter Brennan as Doc Velli, John Erickson as Pete Worth, Ernest Borgnine as Coley Trimble, Lee Marvin as Hector David, and Russell Collins as Mr. Hastings. Recognition for this movie, Bad Day at Black Rock, was released on January 7th, 1955. Based on a short story called Bad Time at Honda by Howard Breslin, published by the American Magazine in January 1947, Bad Day at Black Rock would make roughly $3.8 million on a budget of $1.3 million, finishing outside the top 10 films of the year. Despite its middling box office, the film would be universally praised by critics at the time and would garner 3 Oscar nominations for director for John Sturges, actor for Spencer Tracy, and screenplay for Millard Kaufman. In 2018, it was selected for preservation in the United States National Film Registry by the Library of Congress. Bad Day at Black Rock currently holds a 97% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 3.9 out of 5 on Letterboxd, and is not actually reviewed on Metacritic. So, as we do every week, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
I had none. In fact, I had not even heard of the film and was starting to watch it, and then I remembered that I can't remember where, but I had seen the scene between Tracy and Ernest Borgnine in the diner. And I remember that clip from something. So that's the extent of it. I can't even tell you where I saw that clip before, but I remember watching that and going, boy, Spencer Tracy is a badass. Okay.
Judo chop.
Oh, yeah. I remember watching this about a year ago. I think almost exactly a year ago. I remember enjoying this film. I remember it being somewhat short. And I also remember, I think the minute I finished it, messaging Kieran and saying, "Have you seen this movie? Because this would be right up your alley." And he's like, "Oh yeah, this is one of my favorites. I watch it all the time." So at least my Kieran radar is correct.
There you go. There you go. Yes, I guess which goes to me. I first saw this movie about 5 years ago. I think it was one of those pandemic watches. A friend of the podcast and a former guest on the show, Mike Emmel from Cinemas, was guesting on another podcast discussing the movie, and I had never heard of it before. And it was a breezy runtime, so I said, you know what? Let me watch the film, and I'll check out the podcast. And really, really enjoyed it. And this is one of those films that's very frequently on TCM. TCM has like a little Rolodex of films that they just throw out there a few times a year and that stay on the TCM app, and this tends to be one of them. So I've revisited this one quite a bit since. And if I haven't finished it every time, I've certainly put it on quite a few times. I want to say this is probably maybe the fourth or fifth time I've watched it front to end in that time.
My guess is that because of the runtime, it makes it really malleable to fit between stuff to make the scheduling work out. So it probably runs at really random times during the day, but it's great filler because it's a Spencer Tracy, Lee Marvin, Ernest Borgnine film, and it's 80 minutes. So you can run it at 8:30 a.m. on a Wednesday, and nobody's going to say anything.
Yeah. And I just out of curiosity, I know that, I mean, the most of the choices you make for this show are based on anniversaries. What made you pick this one for this? Anything specific? Was it on that initial list that you guys had made, or was this kind of an add-on?
So I put it on kind of the short list. I don't think, because usually when we're going through the short list, my dad, unless it's got some name recognition for him, he just crosses stuff off. So this really only ended up being in rotation because of the date on which it fell. The back half of the year is so overloaded with anniversaries because everything that's quality comes out later in the year. So January and February get really hard to find stuff that was debuting then, and this just happened to fall in the right space.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, well, yeah, it's I thought it was a unique choice for this show, and I'm happy to be here to talk about it.
I mean, upcoming episodes in the next few weeks, we have MASH next week, Shop Around the Corner, and then La Dolce Vita and Shampoo. That's quite an odd collection of films.
It's eclectic.
Sure. It is probably the most varied part of our schedule for the entire year because the rest of it is just like we're reeling them off left and right. Name recognition up the wazoo the entire season.
Yes, and there's eclectic could probably describe last week's episode in Barry Lyndon. I did enjoy that a bit. I tend to lean a bit more toward Andrew Corns' takes on it, but I appreciated the cross dialogue. And you know, I've been known to listen to Gmote while I'm at Home Depot. That's kind of one of my go-tos. But this week it was all about listening while I took down Christmas decorations. So it was Barry Lyndon, the Gmote team, and all the wreaths and ivies coming down as we went there.
So not only when you're at Home Depot, but when you're taking down the stuff that you bought at Home Depot.
Indeed.
Got it.
Yes.
It's an upgrade.
Yeah, I align you guys with hard labor for me. So.
Okay.
When you're on a chain gang, let us know.
Hopefully it will be I Am a Fugitive from the Chain Gang will be the movie too.
Oh, maybe the revisit of Cool Hand Luke in a couple of years.
Right. Or brother, where art thou?
Yeah, we haven't covered that one yet. That could have probably been in circulation this year. I haven't seen that movie, God, in 20 some years at this point.
Yeah, that's a goodie.
Oh, I have to go back to it at some point. I know my dad didn't like it, but oh well.
I'd have to watch it again. It was so bizarre.
Any worse than the Lady Killers?
Oh, that was just bad.
That was
Tom
like
Hanks's Colonel Sanders.
Tom Hanks was just doing practice for his eventual Colonel Tom Parker. But anyway,
can't say he didn't give us some evidence early on with that. So,
yeah, accent work is not good for Tom Hanks. But oh well. So back to the movie at hand. What is Bad Day at Black Rock about?
This is one of those that I think has a lot of like micro meanings and macro meanings. It can be applied to a lot of different goings on in different periods of the country or the world, however you want to look at it. To me, from a more macro standpoint, we have a standing up to bullies theme here in this one. We have a small town justice versus real justice, and protecting what's comfortable and safe for the benefit of the people versus what actually is best for the entirety of the people, not just the people in charge. So there's definitely that authoritarian approach there too. And when you tie in from a more specific standpoint, if you tie in with the Japanese internment camps and xenophobia and whatnot, there's obviously direct themes there with that. But to me, it can most generally be what it takes to stand up to the bully, especially when it's a ruling bully. From there, so forth from there.
Yeah, I think you hit a few things that I didn't quite have. I kind of narrowed it down to 3 words, and one of them is maybe a loose fit. I was kind of grasping at straws a little bit for this. I would say prejudice is one of them. I think that's the most apparent based on kind of where the story takes us eventually. The other one was corruption, that I really thought was evident in the film. How one person kind of can bend the rest of the town outside of the normal chains of government, administration, etc., to kind of figure out whatever he wants because he has the most money and the most control. And the other one was just greed.
Add to that regret, because a large portion of the characters regret being in that position. Other than that, that's about it as far as I'm concerned.
To me, one of the things it highlights to me, and maybe I'll wait because I don't want to step on if it's a did you know, but there is an element of why checks and balances are super important, and why one person in charge for their own interests is not what's best for the people they're in charge of. There should be more than just one person's or one power's interests in running a town, or if we're taking the town to a larger standpoint from there.
The film, in some ways, it feels dated yet still relevant. I don't know if you can always have that. I mean, it's got elements in both camps, but given the prejudice, given the corruption of things, not even just in a United States fashion, but given where most of our audience resides, I think that's the most applicable. But it does definitely have those elements where we're at culturally. So I do think there are relevant lessons to be learned or extracted from this, even though I think not a lot of people are going to necessarily gravitate towards this movie. It's got kind of a Western aesthetic feel for, even though it's
Absolutely.
supposed to be in a modern setting at the time, or at least contemporary. I believe the short story it's based upon was from 1947. So this is, even though it's made in 55, supposed to be based in 47. So it's really supposed to be of the time in which it's made, but it still has a lot of, as I mentioned, elements that we're still dealing with today.
Yeah. And of course, it has that trope that I love of the stranger coming into the town to shake things up. We talked about that on our Shane episode here. Roadhouse, another great one. High Plains Drifter, amongst many others. So,
Yeah.
It's really Law and Order Tucson.
So I guess the other part that strikes me about the movie is that I think if you don't have the context for internment, is there something lost about the appreciation of the film? While anybody who's kind of even generally studied history roughly knows about it, I wonder if it's more relevant for people that went through it than it is for us in a modern setting, and that you have to have that cultural base to completely appreciate everything about the movie.
I guess, I mean, maybe just as Americans, we're closer to the history books than maybe someone not for our country. But is Japanese internment from World War II that big of a deep track in the history books? I mean, I didn't think it was that obscure, or it didn't strike me as that obscure. But again, maybe just being schooled in America, maybe a little too close to it.
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily hidden. Like, you can definitely read about it. There are books about it. There are firsthand accounts. But how many civics teachers or history teachers are really going through that part of World War II when it's always been memorialized as the greatest generation? And so we don't want to put this extra pockmark on them that they did this really terrible thing at the same time. I do wonder how much we appreciate sometimes that this is something that we did, and you have to reckon with both that we stopped tyranny but also carried out tyranny on our own people.
Let me ask you this though. Let's say you did not know anything about Japanese internment camps. Let's just say you just weren't aware that existed. Don't you think that, like, the movie, in watching the movie, you can still get Pearl Harbor should be well known enough to know what Pearl Harbor is, and I think the beats of the storyline can show the prejudice against the Japanese because of Pearl Harbor, and the fact that this man was persecuted because of it, without knowing exactly what the internment reference is. I think you can still kind of get that xenophobia beat there. For me,
I would agree, because we have a modern relevant equivalent. It's a degree different for the post-war hysteria than we're used to now. And so I don't think there's an appreciation when he starts throwing out terms like Bataan and obviously Pearl Harbor. I think people understand just generally, but certain other historical context pieces from the war, I don't think that universally, especially people that are younger than ourselves. I'm the youngest person I think on this show at 34, and the two of you are just short of 40, I would guess. But
Yeah.
the youngins, sub 30, maybe sub 25, are they picking up on some of the historical clues? I don't know. It's hard for me to say, based on being outside of high school for so long and even outside of college at this point, how much this historical context is still relevant for people.
Okay, let me put it this way. When I was a child, I had 3 experiences with dealing with combat soldiers in the Pacific. The 2 custodians in my grade school took an interest in me because at the time there was a set of magazines being sold called World War II. And they were the same price as my weekly allowance. So I would buy these and devour these. I'd carry them around. I'd have them on my desk. I'd take them to study halls, etc. Well, the one janitor had fought in New Guinea, and the other janitor had fought at Okinawa. And at the same time, after school, my mother worked, so we always had to go someplace between school and when my dad got home. So we would go to this neighbor's, and the husband never worked. And I happened to have these magazines with me. And I would sit and listen to him go off every time a commercial came up for Toyota, or at that time it was Datsun, not eventually became Nissan, but Datsun, and him just going off and getting just violently angry. And I didn't think much of it until he asked me when he saw these magazines, and he had been in the Battalion Death March. And so the amount of bitterness and anger that took place from combat soldiers during that time, it was palpable and visceral. It took a long time for that to dissipate. And I don't know if it's just the attitude because of the culture and the race, or if it's also in part based on what took place during the war. If you watched the miniseries The Pacific, you would see that there was just a brutalness that took place because of cultural aspects that was not in existence in Europe. The Japanese did not follow the Geneva Convention, whereas the Germans and the Italians did. And so this all combines. When I grew up, it was not uncommon for you to still hear the derogatory name for a Japanese person. In fact, I think I finally stopped. It wasn't until the early 90s that I stopped hearing it, pretty much. There was a large amount of racism. This whole story plays into this. And it's historically accurate because what they did was, is if you were a Japanese American and you wanted to volunteer for the army, you weren't able to go to the Pacific. You'd end up getting shot by your own fellow soldiers because of your race. So they sent them to Italy. They were in the 7th Army. They fought in Italy. And so the fact that he's in Italy and this guy saves him or tries to save his life and dies in the process is consistent with the historical accuracy of what took place at that time. Now, I have a couple of questions about it, plot holes. I don't know if you want me to get into them now or to save them till the end.
No, just we'll address them later.
Okay. From a historical standpoint, but still, it kind of really does play into that. And I think that that's a large part of what was going on and why we treated Japanese Americans differently than we did German or Italian Americans at the time or the outbreak of the war. And there was a racial aspect to it.
Well, but I would also argue that the Germans got that kind of treatment post World War I. And because of that, and because the more foreign otherness of the Japanese comparatively by the end of World War II, that they were an easier target than groups that had already been more assimilated into the country, such as Germans or Italians, by the time we got to the 40s. But even so, do you want to dig further into the film, Dad? Do you have our plot summary ready for us?
I do. In Bad Day at Black Rock, director John Sturges crafts a taut, sun-scorched thriller that unfolds with the precision of a coiled spring. When John J. McCready, Spencer Tracy, a stoic one-armed stranger, arrives in a remote desert town, his quiet inquiries about a man named Komoko rattle the fragile veneer of its close-knit community. Suspicion and hostility mount as the town's residents, led by the menacing Reno Smith, Robert Ryan, close ranks to protect a dark secret buried beneath the dusty, desolate landscape.
Thank you. Did you know? According to one biographer of Spencer Tracy, the script did not originally call for the lead character to be a one-armed man. The producers were keen to get Tracy, however, but didn't think he'd be interested, so they gave the character this disability with the idea that no actor can resist playing a character with a physical impairment.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Did you know? Ernest Borgnine did the crash through the door himself, expecting it to swing open as he sailed through it into the street. But without the actor's knowledge, John Sturges nailed the door shut. The momentum ripped it from its hinges, and it ended up hanging on the understandably shocked Borgnine, like a picture frame which provided the desired natural reaction from the actor. Borgnine has never forgiven me for that, Sturges recalled. Did you know? The suit that Spencer Tracy wears throughout the film was purchased by him off the rack at a second-hand store. Did you know? According to Ernest Borgnine, the heat left everyone exhausted. Quote, too damn hot to party. But Spencer Tracy invited everyone to his hotel room for cocktail hour every day, even though he only drank 7-Up. Did you know? Ernest Borgnine always referred to Spencer Tracy as Mr. Tracy, never by his first name. I was in awe of him, he said. To me, he was the world's greatest actor, and my God, here I am working with the man. As fate would have it, Spencer Tracy lost the Academy Award for Best Actor for this year to his co-star, Ernest Borgnine, for his first starring role in Marty. Did you know? The projectionist records have revealed that over the years, this has become one of the most frequently shown films in the White House's screening room.
That was the one I didn't want to step on earlier there. So.
And with that, we will take our first break, and we will be right back.
Are the movies that win Best Picture at the Oscars actually worthy of being called the greatest movies of all time? I'm Andrew from the Revisionist Almanac, and my podcast looks to answer just that question. The show is a monthly interactive experience where I dive into a past year with a rotating group of guests to look at what won Oscars for picture, director, and acting. We revise those winners and then let the actual winners battle out our revised picks in online polls where you, the listener, get to have your voice heard. So come check out the show on all podcast streaming platforms and find the show on every social media platform using the handle RevAlmanac. I can't wait to see you there.
Before we jump back into the episode, next week we welcome back returning guest Adam Vanderwerf to discuss MASH from 1970, directed by Robert Altman, written by Ring Lardner Jr., music by Johnny Mandel, starring Donald Sutherland, Elliot Gould, Tom Skerritt, and Robert Duvall. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you.
That's REELGOOD.
And before we get much further, Kieran, what are you working on and where can people find you?
Yes, I host Best Picture Cast. It is a Oscar Best Picture podcast. We go through all of them, the whole list, one by one. We started with back in 2020, right around when you guys started. We're a bi-weekly, so you guys have covered way more ground in that time than us. So we go every other week, but we're in our 6th season now. Each season's 15 Best Picture winners. We just started up our 6th season, and as of this week, it should be available. Our No Country for Old Men episode, the Coen Brothers classic from 2007, will be there. We're also tackling Forrest Gump this month. We'll be doing the first Best Picture winner, Wings. And It Happened One Night, the winner of the Big Five. Those are going to be the 4. And then Coda. So there's our first 5 episodes of the season we're doing there. So you can check out our back catalog, though. Like I said, we have 5 years worth of Best Picture winners of all sorts of variety. So go back. They don't really age because we're talking about movies that have been out. So yeah, check out our stuff there. It's Best Picture Cast on all the socials. Come check us out. We're always looking for new people to check us out and tell us what we're doing wrong. So please.
Yeah, because that's what film Twitter's for. I'm just waiting for the episode on Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah, well, that'll be probably next spring. So we're a year away.
Shucks.
Yeah, I know. It's going to get super interesting because it's also one of my girlfriend's favorite movies. So the plot thickens. So I might have to have her on for that one, and we'll have a real interesting tug of war episode. So
I think the dynamic of you two is going to be ever increasingly enjoyable.
Got to build it up.
But definitely a natural on the mic. And so I'm looking forward to seeing her back. 1934 is her next one?
She's going to be doing It Happened One Night. So
okay, I did get that right.
Continue.
All right. Yeah. Good deal. And then your Wings is your anniversary episode, right?
Yes, Wings is our anniversary episode, so the main 5 of us will be on for that. Silent film from 1927, 1928, so we'll see how it goes. But I remembered liking it. I haven't seen it in 15, 20 years, so we'll see how that goes. And we have video going now too, which is fun. We've been trying to film these in person. We did video for No Country for Old Men, so that'll be up on our YouTube page, which we're launching. It's a Best Picture Cast LINY. So Long Island, New York is what the LINY is. So, check us out there too. Our live event that we did on Jurassic Park's up there also. Yeah, so give us a follow, give us a listen or a look. So
it'll be great to get you guys in video finally. Welcome to the world of video podcasting.
I know, right? We can't hide behind the video killed the radio star. We'll see. It might split our viewership in half. We'll see.
Oh, no worse than this show. I mean, they got to look at my resting nerd face.
Come on.
Oh, but anyway, a couple of more items to knock off the list here. But first off, what did we bring for brown liquor to the episode this week, gentlemen?
Yes, Dana, why don't you go first here? 'Cause mine's a little...
I am finishing up a bottle of my old standby, which is just Evan Williams. It's my stock and trade. This is what I drink during the middle of the week. Try to have a little bit of an upgrade for the weekends. Sometimes I keep a couple of bottles just for more special occasions, or when I'm just feeling like I need to treat myself.
Yes. And Evan Williams is the sponsor of the MLB playoffs, I believe, each year. So it comes in handy out there in Milwaukee.
I still have a bottle of their master blend, which is normal Evan Williams 10 years, Evan Williams 20 years, and a single barrel. They made it up and only produced so many. And when I happened to be at the distillery last summer, they said, we got this whole pallet that was supposed to be going to Ukraine to an oligarch, but we can't ship it. So we're just going to sell it. So each of you gets one bottle. So I bought a bottle and I had my wife buy a bottle, and I've already consumed one. And I've got another one there sitting that's waiting for a very special occasion, but excellent.
Now, and I know that, or if I'm to understand, the Ask Dana Anything section is now defunct.
Yeah, basically. We were putting too many guests on the spot with it. It became awkward.
Well, I'll for one last night, I'll relive it. Will you be drinking any less Evan Williams now that Devin Williams is no longer a brewer?
No.
No,
It'll keep it. Yeah.
We did fine without him, and quite frankly, I'm still pissed off about him tipping his pitches to the frickin' Mets.
Well, that was kind of my point, is like that caused the Evan. The Devin caused the Evan.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
I know. And it seemed like even after he came back, every other time he was saving it, he had to like load the bases before he got the last out. I thought Trevor McGill was a better closer, and he was a hell of a lot cheaper. And I think we netted some pretty decent talent as a result of that trade. So I'm not at all worried.
That organization always seems to find the next guy in line to come in and do the job. So
Precisely. When it comes to relief pitching, it is not the area that I'm concerned with. I'm more concerned with first base and third base.
yeah. So for brown liquor, for me, my brother got me this Scotch variety pack, which is kind of nice for Christmas. So they're kind of, they're not huge bottles, but they're like these little guys here.
Oh, sure.
And there's three. There's a 10-year, a 14-year, and a 12-year. I started off with the 14, and it was dangerously smooth. So I moved over to the 10, and the 10 is way peatier, so peaty and smoky. So that'll be a little more slow going to slow me down a little bit.
Is that
I thought it said
Jurors?
Talisker.
Talisker is the 10, Clinalish is the 14, and then Cal-Ila is the 12. Probably pronounced none of those correctly, but
Yeah, you got to work on your Gaelic there.
Yeah, I think I had a similar type thing I bought and we consumed for my 50th birthday.
Well, Slanja, gentlemen. But
yes, aren't you?
I'll have to resort to my tap water here.
That's fine. You're in law school. You got to recharge.
If I did law school like my father did, I'd also be drinking.
Yeah, well, that was law school. Get up in the morning, start studying, go to class, study in between, study about 10:30 when they close the library. A bunch of you would walk over to the bar, throw whatever money you had on the table, drink pitchers of beer till you either couldn't stand up or couldn't remember why you were there, and then stagger home. And then in the morning, rinse and repeat.
What a time to be alive.
Well, let's get back into the movie of the evening. We left off at best performance. Dad, who do you have down?
I have Spencer Tracy. It was close to who I had for my secondary performance, but I mean, it's frickin' Spencer Tracy. I've always loved Spencer Tracy. Not only do I love him as an actor, he's from Milwaukee. So why wouldn't you love Spencer Tracy? And what made his performance great is I understand perfectly why they cast him in this. His kind of, I'm going to roll with the punches personality that comes across in so many of his roles was just perfect for this part.
If you can get past the notion of I want to say like mid to late 50s, Spencer Tracy
54.
being at 54, excuse me.
Yep. I looked
54
it up.
going on 74, but
Yeah. A 54-year-old Spencer Tracy being a recent GI who's also an action hero with one arm. If you could get over that, he is fantastic in this film because fuck, it's Spencer Tracy. So yes, he's also my best performer.
Do we have any problem with Schwarzenegger? Who's
In what
like
way?
in his early 70s now, still being an action star?
Well, kinda. He hasn't really done anything of significant note. He's just kind of trying to hang on to Terminator movies, even though there's only one good one.
Yeah.
hey, fighting words there. How dare
I
you?
tried to troll you a little. T2, I should say, is on the season 7 schedule.
When is T1 getting its just reevaluation there for that one?
I'll
Guys
leave that
butchered
to
one of my favorite movies.
co-host here.
When do I ever get to decide anything?
Excuse me. I ran almost the entire schedule by you.
But it never feels like I actually get to have any decision-making power. I just feel like you have my input and then do what you want anyway. But okay.
Okay.
Wow. What
Incredibly untrue.
Okay.
There are things that if I just had my own way, we would have talked about a long time ago, but we put on stuff that only you have heard of, like Elmer Gantry.
I've
Stalag
never seen
47.
the film, but I've wanted to see the film forever. So I thought, there's my chance.
Okay.
I had to read excerpts of the book for class back in college.
You're also the one that demanded we do Frankenstein and Dracula next year.
Because they're freaking cool.
Yeah, I like that. And hey, Stalag 47 was a Dana demand, and I'm proud of that episode. You know,
It's 17.
oh, Stalag 17. Sorry, yeah, I'm drinking
He's on 3 Stalags from. He's also got a math problem, apparently.
Oh yeah, well,
well.
that's documented. I got one of the two numbers right. All right, that's a win for me.
But anyway, yeah, it's Spencer Tracy for me.
Spencer Tracy was my secondary. I had John Sturges as my best performer. I think the way that this movie looks can be taken for granted. I thought the director had such a brilliant grasp on the small town amidst the vast surroundings. This could have looked like a Hollywood lot western, like a Gunsmoke or something like that, had it not been handled properly. I thought the continued shots of the train tracks cutting through the screen and all of that. The opening is brilliant. I really thought this was a superiorly directed film and a well-earned Oscar nomination. So I had John Sturges as my top performer.
Secondary, you just said yours, but I will go with Robert Ryan. I think he's a really great heavy in this. He's a very capable to hate bad guy, which you kind of need in a Western. The fairly clear, defined black hat. The guy that that you have two very easily opposing sides, especially in kind of this post-war era where we wanted very clearly defined heroes and villains. I think he plays that very aptly. But he doesn't make it mustache twirly. And so that's what I kind of like about this, that it is, even though he's a clearly defined villain and you definitely know where he's sitting on this, he's a terrible human being, that it's not played to kind of a comical level. It's much more understated. You have to kind of really go with the punches a lot on this. And even though there are multiple villains, because he's definitely got his lackeys, he's the one truly pulling the strings. So he's got a little extra villainy behind it. But he does it through such a smiling veneer that it feels like the guy who smiles at you and then knifes you as he's doing so.
Yeah, well said. And you always love to have that villain who believes, or who you're convinced he believes he's right. Even though there's moments in this where he really dials it up with his villainy. But, he has that speech at the gas station where it's like, oh, this guy's certainly convinced he has a point.
It comes out again later. 9 years later, 10 years later, in The Dirty Dozen.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in the Dirty Dozen.
Yes, he is. He's the general that is the antagonist.
Oh, yes, he is. Okay, I'm sorry. I was going to say the only other one that I remember him really being in of any note is the Wild Bunch.
No, he was a long-time character actor. He'd been around for tons of things. So, for me, best secondary performance was John Sturges. How in the world you could pack this into 80 minutes? I mean, if you were really a modern director, you'd try to figure out some way of like stretching this into 3 hours. And he just said,
True.
no, I don't need to. He says, I can show the landscape, I can show the people, I can show it, and I can make it tight. I can make it have each scene have impact and it all blend and be done. And all of a sudden you're just in the middle of this and then it's done. And you're like, wow, that happened fast. I mean, this is an 88-minute film that almost is like you would expect a less, maybe an hour-long TV show with the commercials. It just breezes by. And it's because of him. I don't think I've ever seen a film that's so tightly edited, so tightly shot, so tightly scripted out, and the characters developed in such a very short period of time as this film. It's almost like a master class on how to do a film in an abbreviated manner and have great impact.
An elevated short film.
Yeah.
Certainly very podcast host friendly. The 80-minute runtime, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Martin Scorsese, he is not. Most charismatic, I have Lee Marvin. You could tell that this guy was at some point going to get more leading roles, but he is really good at being a bad guy. He did it for a long time. I obviously famously enjoy him very much as Liberty Valance, but he's mustache twirly without being mustache twirly. It's weird. He's kind of always straddling this fine line between being a little bit out there, challenging you a little bit with what he's doing, being very vibrant, very vocal, very visceral, and yet it never feels like he somehow overdoes it. It's understated yet vibrant. It's kind of an odd combination, and usually when you get those, these guys are the stars of things.
I went with a wrestling tag team here, the Bad Boys of Bad Rock. I have Lee Marvin and Ernie Borgnine coming in together on this one. The two big bullies of this one, the two henchmen, and they took the bully heavy approach in two kind of very contrasting ways. You had the smiling bully with Ernest Borgnine, and you had the frowning bully with Lee Marvin, both menacing in their own ways. If you don't have that in this film, the townspeople tend to kind of all blend together. So those two guys stirring the pot really lifted the cast for me. There's something truly terrifying of, when Ernest Borgnine is berating McCready over the bowl of chili, who at this point we think is just a crippled kind of old man. To think if that's all he was, a crippled old man, that wouldn't have stopped Borgnine's character at all from what he was doing. And that's, those are like those real little horrors of life like that when a bully can't and isn't being stopped. So, and Marvin had plenty of those instances as well. So I thought the two of them as a duo was unbelievably charismatic.
I have a problem with Ernie Borgnine as a heavy. I grew up watching McHale's Navy.
Okay, but you had no problem with him when we did From Here to Eternity.
I know, but
he's a much worse heavy in that.
I know, but still.
I mean, he kills Frankie Blue Eyes.
Well, that's true. But anyway, I kind of went out in the left field with my most charismatic. I have Dean Jager. I've only seen him in 3 films. This film, 12 O'Clock High, where he won the Academy Award for Best Actor, And then he played the general in White Christmas to Danny Kaye and Bing Crosby. Other than that, I don't remember seeing him in too many other things. But he always strikes me as a guy who takes over every scene he's in. And so I think he made a perfect drunken sheriff trying to reclaim his own righteousness. And so I have him as most charismatic.
A good character.
Let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees, and then you can fill in where you'd like. I have renting a room, kind of that opening sequence where Tracy's trying to get the room, and then he does eventually get the room, but then Lee Marvin's trying to obviously intimidate him and such. Then I have the Jeep chase. I have the diner fight. I have Pete's confession, which I think is one of the few emotional climaxes of the movie. And then final showdown with Smith. Now, what did I miss?
You had Smith at the gas station?
I don't.
Okay, yeah, I liked that kind of initial mano-a-mano confrontation between Spencer Tracy and Robert Ryan, where he kind of just gives him his perspectives on the world. The first time we see the two kind of just lock swords a little bit. So,
Dad, anything to add?
No, actually, I didn't. Which
Okay.
is a little unusual, but still.
So, what is the best scene?
I think the diner scene is the best scene. I mean, it's just electric. And it comes at the perfect point of the movie, which is a mark of a great director, knowing when it's time to up the ante. And it's so uncomfortable when a Borgnine goes into "you're sitting in my stool" and just backs him into the corner. And I am someone who's able to suspend his disability with the judo chop. So I love that scene, and the you in the did you know, as you talked about the mechanics of the door and that, I think it really looks good. I mean, I'm sorry that it wasn't so actor work friendly, but I totally dig that scene. I think it's the best scene in the film.
I have that as my favorite scene and my most indelible, but I went with the Jeep chase as my best scene, only for the technical achievement of what they did during that scene. Knowing that Sturgis was not in charge of the initial shot of the train, there's actually a "did you know" that I didn't include for that, where his DP actually went out and figured out how to do the backward tracking shot of that in order to make it work. But he did do the Jeep chase, and I do think there are two real set pieces. It's the diner fight and it's the Jeep chase. Because even the final scene feels very abrupt, and despite Spencer Tracy making a Molotov cocktail, it's never like you're figuring he's going to go full Clint Eastwood and Unforgiven on Smith. It's not that kind of movie. He's got to be the hero and do something unexpected, but it's not going to be in this like gunfight manner. So you have to figure out other ways of integrating some action in here. I thought the Jeep chase was actually very well done on a technical standpoint for the camera work involved in that. And especially given that even James Bond films like 7 or 8 years later were using that really weird thing where you could tell in old movies when they're a car set behind with a backdrop of a green screen or something else playing behind it. This to me felt a little bit more lived in, a little bit more practical effect, and that you could get more involved into what was going on with it. So I have that as the best scene.
Great call. Yeah, great call. Well said.
My best scene is renting a room. The entire unraveling of this sets the stage for the film. It gives you the feel of what's going on. It raises questions. It kind of sets you in a tone of, I'm in the middle of a mystery and I'm trying to unravel it myself. And it places you in the shoes of MacReady trying to figure out what the frick is going on. And it kind of sets the mood and the tension within the film, not to mention the fact that the camera work and the scenic shots and everything about it were so beautifully done. So to me, that's the best scene. And as far as favorite scene, it's the diner fight. And as somebody who's 5'3", being able to beat the shit out of the bully, oh God, that's so good. I so enjoy that.
Even if it does make me think about Michael Caine and Goldmember.
Yeah.
You're
Anyway.
a henchman without a name? Oh, you've got no chance.
Yeah. So most indelible, though, is still, to me, is the renting a room. Because when I started thinking about the film, the first thing I thought about was the train pulling in and the single person getting out with a suitcase and walking through, and the whispers and the looks and everybody worrying about what was going to happen. So to me, that set the stage and is the one thing of the film that I remember the most, and probably will be for a while.
My favorite is just that little confrontation between them at the gas station. It reminds me of the Roadhouse scene where I brought J.C. Penney to this town. You know, how dare you tell me? Where you get Patrick Swayze confronting the heavy there.
I'll have to take your word for it. I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, Roadhouse classic. It gives you a little look into the mind of the villain here in this, and how, you know, he is weirdly feeling like the victim of the bullies of America. You know, everyone wants to come into the West and make it their West. It's almost like he's sticking up for the town in his own odd way, and it sets the tone for this narrative that's going to ensue, and gets you in the mind of the town a little bit. So I had to shout that out. But my indelible, the thing I think about all the time, I look back on Bad Day at Black Rock, and I'm happy, Tom, that you gave the little tidbit on this, because it is the opening with the train, and the DP's name and directors of photography are often the unsung heroes in some of these great movies. William C. Meller, who was a 2-time Oscar winner, he won 2 of his awards on John Stevens projects, The Diary of Anne Frank and A Place in the Sun. The opening of this film is top shelf. Like, this is as good as it gets for one of these things. It sucks you into this world. It drops you off in this small little town in the desert, and it goes into a lot of that tightly packed runtime that Dana was talking about before. If you're going to tell a compact short story, you best start it off right. And this movie really does. So I'll always go back to that opening with the train and the score pumping. And it's cool to know that the DP really was the captain of that. We just covered, as I said before, No Country for Old Men. And Roger Deakins really had to have his hands on with all the scouting locations and that thing. And making this movie look like the book was putting out there. And he was talking about how the script would just say West Texas landscape. And he's like, oh, great. You know, I guess that's on me, you know, to find the right landscape to have this thing look. So, yeah, that's for me, the scene that I look back on and think Bad Day at Black Rock, the intro to the film.
Well, that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back.
Hey, movie lovers, this is Kyle, host and producer of the Movie Wars podcast. We're not just a movie review podcast. There's plenty of those. On Movie Wars, a panel of stand-up comedians blends humor with deep film analysis using their unique war card system to grade movies across key categories. Each episode delivers thoughtful insights and spirited debate, offering a fresh comedic take on film analysis. New episodes drop every Thursday on all podcasting platforms and YouTube. Deeply researched, gut-wrenchingly funny, you'll love Movie Wars.
Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every great movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 219 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. Jeff Baena, 47, American film director and screenwriter. The Little Hours, Horse Girl, and Spin Me Round. Wayne Osmond, 73, American singer. Was in the Osmonds. Songwriter, Crazy Horses, Let Me In. John Capodice, 83, American Actor, General Hospital, Ace Ventura, and Seinfeld. Brenton Wood, 83, American singer-songwriter, songs The Oogum Boogum Song and Give Me Little Sign. Dale Wilson, 74, Canadian voice actor, Dragon Ball Z, G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero, X-Men Evolution. Emilio Echeverria, 80, Mexican actor, Amores Perros, Die Another Day, and The Alamo. Peter Yarrow, 86, American singer, was in the group Peter, Paul, and Mary, Leaving on a Jet Plane, and the songwriter of Puff the Magic Dragon Lives by the Sea,
which gave us one of the all-time great classic moments in a Robert De Niro film, Meet the Parents.
Shout outs to John Capodice, a Seinfeld veteran. He's the laundromat owner with the Met hat who gets who has the guys beat up on his poor his machines and that. And Ace Ventura too. I think he's like the grizzly. I think he's with the grizzly cops or the grizzly landlords in that. But we got one of those distinctive faces, so that's good. And did you say that Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul, and Mary wrote "Leaving on a Jet Plane" by John Denver?
Yes, apparently.
Oh, what a song!
Well, it says that they sang it.
Oh, they sang it.
Songwriter, okay. He wrote Puff the Magic Dragon.
Yeah.
Leaving on a Jet Airplane was written by John Denver, but was performed by Peter, Paul, and Mary.
Gotcha. Yeah, what amazing song.
We thank them all here for their contributions to the arts with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. Best funniest lines. I only have 4, but I'll take the first one off the table here. Sam Cafe Proprietor, what'll you have? McCready, what have you got? Chili and beans. Anything else? Chili without beans?
Reno Smith. She must have strained every muscle in her head to get so stupid.
John McCready, you're not only wrong, you're wrong at the top of your voice.
McCready, you killed Komoko, Smith, and sooner or later you're going to go up for it. Not because you killed him, because I think in a town like this you can get away with it, but because you didn't have the guts to do it alone. You put your trust in guys like these and Hector here, not the most dependable of God's creatures, and one of these days they're going to catch on that you're playing him for a sap. And then what are you going to do? Peel them off one by one? And in the meantime, one of them's going to crack. And when they do, you're going to go down, but hard. 'Cause they got something on you, Smith. Something to use when the going gets tough, and it's going to get tougher every minute.
Doc T.R. Villay Jr. First, you sell them a piece of land. You think they'll farm it. They do not. They dig for gold. They rip off the topsoil of 10 windmill hills, then sprint in here all fog-haved with excitement, lunging nuggets, big, bright, and shiny. Is it gold? It's not. Do they quit? They do not. Then they decide to farm. Farm in a country so dry that you have to prime a man before you can spit. Before you can say, Fat Sam, they're stalled, stranded and starving. They become weevil-brained and butt-sprung. So I bury 'em. But why bore you with my triumphs?
Reno Smith. I don't know. Somebody's always looking for something in this part of the West. To the historian, it's the Old West. To the book writer, it's the Wild West. To the businessman, it's the undeveloped West. They say we're all poor and backward, and I guess we are. We don't even have enough water. But to us, this place is our West, and I wish they'd leave us alone.
McCready, oh, I'll only be here for 24 hours. Conductor, in a place like this, it could be a lifetime.
John J. McCready, you know, I know what your trouble is, son. You'd like me to die quickly, wouldn't you? Without wasting too much of your time. Or quietly, so I won't embarrass you too much. Or even thankfully, so that your memory of the occasion won't be too unpleasant.
I like this line because it reads like a Macho Man Randy Savage line. Oh, yeah. So I'm just going to read it off that way. I believe a man is as big as he's seeking, and I believe you're a big man, McCready. It's channeling some 80s WWE there with that.
I'm out.
So am I.
I am too.
Oh, good. Synergy. All right, let's go to the Stanley rubric then. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film, approximately after the initial 5 years, so roughly 1960 to today. What is the legacy of the film? We split this category between the industry and the general audience for 5 points and 5 points for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll go first. This is preserved for the National Film Registry. It's shown a lot, and I know that the critics still think of this film quite often. I'm going to give it a 3 for the industry. But this is a film that not too many people know about. In fact, I think I'm a pretty sophisticated film viewer, and I had not heard of the film until we put it on the list. So I'm going with a 1.5. There's enough people in the cineculture that know the film and love the film that I can't go lower than that. But I'm there, so that gives me a 5.
Yet another coined phrase in our film glish that we're creating. Cineculture. Okay. Add that to cinefungus, cinemasochist, I don't even remember. We have too many of them now. We're going to have to create a Gmote dictionary.
Any film by Brian De Palma's sadist.
Next week, you guys are doing MASH, which is Cine Unwatchable.
I don't know why people loved Altman so much.
Oh yeah, Cine Woke was in there too.
Yeah, Cine Woke.
Okay, yeah. I will mirror most of your point totals, except I don't give it as much credit on the industry side of things. I would say that I have a 2.5 on that side because honestly, this does not come up in the historical record that often. It's not in like one of these greatest movie of all time lists all that much. I'm actually surprised that it ended up on the National Registry, but it took a long time for it to get there. We're talking the National Film Registry was around for almost 30 years before this movie was inducted. So it's not like, and it's not that the registry is a small selection of films every year. It's like 20 to 25 films. So for it to kind of like take its sweet time getting there, I have a 2.5 on the industry side. But I also fell at your 1.5 for the audience because I had originally thought maybe this was a 1 given its lack of name recognition. But I thought usually for me a 2 is that the majority of like the deep cinebros have seen the film. And I just couldn't get myself to thinking that half of the people on Letterboxd had heard of this film, let alone seen it. I thought it was closer to like 25%. Because when we did our film discussion group last year, and these people are, fairly dyed-in-the-wool film people, most of the people at that group had not heard of it. So I went with what I thought would be 25%, which is approximately a 1.5. So I have a 4.
So Dana, you had a 5, and Tom, you had a 4.
I think he had a 4.5 because he had a 3
4.5?
and a 1.5.
Okay.
So if he misstated that, I missed it. But
no, I think I misstated.
Ooh, boy, this is tricky. It's like it's got a great cast, and it's got a bunch of recognizable names in it, which will draw attention to someone perusing old films today. A problem with it is I don't think it's really anyone involved's most notable project. The one area where you could refute that is that it's John Sturges' lone Oscar nomination. While he's clearly more well-known for The Great Escape, and he did The Dirty Dozen too, or he did the Magnificent Seven. Maybe I'm thinking.
You might be right. Let me just fact check you here. He did Great Escape, Magnificent Seven, this, Joe Kidd.
Okay,
Eagle
Magnificent
Was
Seven
Landed.
is what I was thinking of there. Yeah.
Yeah.
but it is his lone Oscar nom, so that's gonna get some people looking at it, I suppose. I was thinking today, like, oh, this couldn't have gone well in the Office poll. So I think you guys are kind of on the mark with the people. In the industry would kind of be where you debate, and maybe because it's John Sturgis's lone Oscar nomination, you have kind of that fun thing where it's a Spencer Tracy nomination alongside Borgnine in a year where Borgnine wins. That's kind of like a fun industry thing going on there you could look back at. Now, if I'm going to give it a little love on the people side, I will say when we talk about the people, sometimes we like to focus on like the younger generations, but I do think the TCM audience matters too. And I think, the fact that this is on TCM so much that I think if I were roll it around at like my uncles and whatnot, they'd probably have something to say about it. All that being said, I'm not really looking to rattle cages with this one. I think I'll probably just match Dana's score exactly, with the 1.5 for audience. Maybe I'd go 2 with audience and then 2.5 with industry for the 4.5. That's probably where I'd go with it. Half split it in the industry and then give a little extra boost for the TCM crowd there. So I go 4.5.
Yes, this is a point of contention, how our guests seem to always want to match me and go against Tom. So he's like, I seem to be the heavy on my own show.
I go point by point, though. If Tom makes a good point, I lean into Tom. But Dana, I think I liked your score there. So me and you weren't simpatico on the Saw episode. In fact, no, I wasn't simpatico with anyone on the Saw episode. I was just kind of
true.
Kind of chained to the wall with some sort of device on my head. But
that is a 4.3 repeating average between the three of us. Impact and significance. This is a measure of the impact and significance of the film in the initial 5 years that it was released. This is roughly 1955 to 1960. What was the impact and significance shared between the audience and the industry? Again, a 5 and 5 split for a total of 10. Let's let our guest, who is no stranger to the categories, lead off.
Yes, a director nomination is a big deal. You can't fault that. Not a super strong year, of course, but we have big names in this. We have Oscar winners in this between Borgnine and Tracy and Lee Marvin. There's some controversial material that I think made an impact. And one thing we didn't mention in Legacy that maybe I'll give it points for here since it didn't come up is the fact that it's screened often in the White House. And that while, we're talking about the 5 years when the movie comes out, that sort of thing gets established within the movie hitting the precipice. So maybe the point that I should have given it back then, I'd give it here. Box office, as you mentioned before, a little bit mediocre, did make money. Maybe I'll go, because of the director nomination with the industry, I will go 3 nominations: screenplay, actor, director. That's nothing to stick your nose up at. Good cast, notable director. We'll go 3 with the industry. And I'd say with the people, because it made an impact on the White House, I'll be a little kinder than I would have been. And I'll say a 2.5, an even split, is kind of, mediocre box office, but did make some money and did have some impact there. So we'll go with a 5.5 total.
As for me, I do think that it has some impact among the critics circle. I mean, the fact that this was fairly well universally praised despite its box office. I think this is one that the critics enjoyed, but not a lot of the normies or the general audience really got into. And maybe that's a byproduct of when it was released, that this was kind of just thrown out at the beginning of the year when I guess I'm not sure what the industry or the economics of movies were in 1955, but nowadays we call this dumpuary.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But Spencer Tracy movie, you had a lot of people that would go on to be bigger stars within the next 5 years. I think that the nominations that it did receive, even though it was kind of a weird year. I mean, has anyone taken a look at what was actually nominated that year?
Yeah, totally weird year.
So Marty won, but Love is a Many Splendored Thing.
Yep.
Mr. Roberts, which we covered in season 1, The Rose Tattoo, and Picnic
Yeah,
were
Picnic
the other
is in there,
nominees for Best Picture. Director, the only other ones that you could pick out are Summertime and East of Eden by Elia Kazan. So David Lean and Elia
Yeah.
Kazan.
And that's a Katharine Hepburn nomination too, right? In
Correct.
Summertime. Yeah.
You also had some other various nominees, but it wasn't like heavily nominated at the top. So James Dean was nominated for Best Actor, but it was for East of Eden, despite the fact that we're going to be discussing his other film from that year later on this year, Rebel Without a Cause, which I think most people think is the better movie.
I would think if someone were to come up with an idea to put a project together to like go back and look at that year and pick out what maybe should have been nominated, Summertime would be there. East of Eden would probably be there along Marty and this. Maybe I'll start a podcast like that. I don't know. We'll gotta think about that.
Do you have to watch like 27 movies from this year?
How novel.
They got it wrong this year. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm trying to say.
By the way, anybody or either of you know what the top box office draw that year was?
I thought it was Marty.
Ooh, 50. Is it a Disney animated?
It is.
It is. Okay. How about Alice in Wonderland?
Nope.
Cinderella?
Nope. Spaghetti.
Lady and the Tramp.
Ah, yes.
And number
This
2?
is the night.
Isn't that the range of To Catch a Thief?
Nope. Mr. Roberts. Hitchcock had 2 films that year that finished in the top 10. To Catch a Thief, which was 7, and
It's The Man Who Knew Too Much. He didn't make another
Rope.
film that.
yes, he did. It
Rope.
was released in October of 55.
Oh, Trouble with Harry.
Trouble with Harry.
Okay.
And that summer's comedy, it was number 11, The 7-Year Itch, which precipitated the Marilyn Monroe, Joe DiMaggio divorce.
That's the air coming out of the grate on the sidewalk, right? Yeah.
Yes. But either way, circling back to my scoring on this one, I have a 4 for the industry. I also think that even though it was a tepid box office, I don't think it was completely ignored. 3 times its budget, as one raised fist guest has so eloquently put on multiple occasions, shouldn't be completely dismissed out of hand. I have a 2.5 on that, so I have a 6.5.
I'm going with the industry. It had, it wasn't just, it was director, it was best
Screenplay and
actor.
actor.
It had some pretty significant nominations. The critics loved it. I didn't find too many critics who did not like the film. So I'm going to go with a 4. And for the public, it finished out of the top 10, but it was like 12 or 13, depending on what exactly method you used to calculate it.
There were no good box office calculators at that time, so
Yeah, I
it's really
know.
hard to say.
So I'm going to go with a 2.5. So I'm going to go with a 6.5 also.
So you both landed on a 6.5 and made some good points. So I think that's fair to. I think in putting on my Gmote Revisited hat, I think we can agree on this number and put it in. Put the calculator away. Let's make it a 6.5. I like that.
I do too. All right, let's move to Novelty then. This is a measurement of the originality of the idea and a measurement of the execution on said idea. We split this category 5 and 5 between those 2 points for what we think is novel about the film. Dad, let's let you lead.
The originality of the film, which is take a more modern issues and put it in what is the equivalent of a Wild West setting, to me was rather original. So I went with a 4 for originality. And as far as the execution, as I've said, Sturgis made a greatly entertaining, tight film that was beautifully shot, that had great acting, that there was very little that you could criticize about that as far as execution. So I'm with a 4.5. So I'm at a 9 point or an 8.5, excuse me, overall for this for Novelty.
I'm going to cover this very quickly. I would raise all of the same points, and yet because even though I very much enjoy the film and why we're even covering it to begin with, I need to leave room for much more extraordinary films. In my opinion, I think this is a little bit more average, kind of run of the mill. So I had a 2.5 for the novelty of the idea, or I guess the originality, and I had a 3 on execution, just because I think they're much more technically sound, better shot, better acted films. Not that this is bad. I give it just slightly above average, but I don't think this is all that original to me. I kind of go middle of the road a little bit, and I give it just a slightly above average as far as execution. So I have a 5.5.
An innovation standpoint, we are leaning on some Western tropes here. And I kind of like what Tom said about there being a run-of-the-mill feel to the overall scope of this. So I kind of like that 2.5 mid-ranged. Now, so this next one, I don't know whether to talk about in innovation or execution, because I think it has an element of both to it. And that's what Tom was talking about the intro, and that I don't know necessarily the DP was the first person to ever do it, but he had to figure it out to make it work. So there's a level of innovation to how that's shot from that standpoint, and that it wasn't like he was like, hey, copy and paste with something that's been done before. And the execution of it was brilliant, because I don't see that as filmed in reverse when I watch it. I had to have you tell me that. Like, to me, it looks fantastic. So while I'm going to ultimately be closer to Tom's score, I think I might give it like a half point up love for that opening. I actually think the ending is pretty poor. I don't like the execution of the ending at all. To me, that it runs into like a quick like shootout. Let's wrap it up and move kind of thing. So I'd say the last, I actually really like the final scene, but like all the stuff at night there, that's my least favorite section of the movie, that like 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes. So, Tom, you were at what number?
I was at a 5.5.
But yeah, I'm going to match that. 5.5. Yeah. I don't think I can quite go up to the 6th, but I'd kind of say like I'd initially say 5, and I'd give the half point up for that intro there. So let's go 5.5. I agree with you there. See, I give you some love too there, Tom.
So this is also a 6.5 average between the three of us.
Okay.
Gotta love those nice, clean numbers. Single decimal digits, All right, let's move to classicness. Now, I have not yet let off a category, and that is a little bit strategic here, partly on the basis that I was waiting for a couple of these later categories to maybe pull some new shenanigans on the show.
Ooh. Now, from what I understand, classicness has gone under the microscope here after our wonderful Up in the Air episode.
Yes, you would be correct. There have been some complaints lodged and to a degree heard. I think that when we originally started doing I started a 7 because we worked down most. That was in an era where we were really nitpicking things on a classicness scale, and we've kind of gotten away from a lot of that, where we don't seemingly find a lot of faults with things. And so by that extension, I'm going to move mine down from the 7 to a 6, at least temporarily, to see where things more settle in.
Oh, okay.
So with that in mind, I don't see a lot of things wrong in here, except that there are a couple of dated things. Obviously, the technology, the use of train fare to be like a primary mode of transportation feels somewhat dated. Classic, but dated. And there's a little bit of political incorrectness with some of the racial language that maybe you need some historical context to maybe understand, because it doesn't sound that awful, but in the context of when it was used, I think it makes a lot more sense. So I don't take off terrible amounts of points for that, because it does add to the story and some realism of the time, but it's also a little bit dated on that side of it for me. You can give it a couple of points back again for being somewhat timeless. I do think that this film is generally, you understand if you're watching it now that this is a 1950s-esque film, it's Spencer Tracy, etc. So you know what you're watching, but you don't have a problem with it because of where that's at. So I ultimately fall at a 7.5.
Okay. I know Dana usually goes first in this one, but is it all right if I go next here? Maybe this is today.
Go ahead.
He goes last. It's all right. So, because I also reviewed some of those complaints that were sent in, and this is more from a guest editorial corner here. And I reviewed them, and ultimately I came up with the fact that Andy cracked corns, and I don't care. I think we were spot on with Up in the Air and in what we said with it, and I stand by it. Now, this movie.
Let me say in your defense, you have not been on for all 219 reviewed films. You've been on for, this is now the 11th different one that you've helped cover. So you are not responsible for several of the films that he highlighted, such as the 2 Godfather movies or Taxi Driver or Goodfellas, etc., that I would place more blame on my co-host than I would on you. But please continue.
I can. It's a guest editorial. I can only speak for myself and potentially the man without the microphone tonight in Peterson W. Hill. But to me, it's I gotta look at the movie based on the scale and the criteria we're given. But I for this one, I do like how this movie ages in perspective and context of where society's at with how we're handling certain social dynamics. I think the movie can be reevaluated based on where you're at in this, because there's a historical vibe that this movie gives off, and that's not to say like it's a piece of history that we should learn about. It's like a piece of history that repeats itself, as history tends to do. So I kind of like that aspect of it. I think it looks really good, and I think it still looks really good, and that keeps it a bit classic. God, I mean, I do think that there needs to be something said that this isn't a household name, and I think a 7 is pretty fair, which is the old baseline of, I'm not taking points off, I'm not really giving it points. And, if I'm giving it a point, then I'm kind of putting it on the newer baseline that you're saying, Tom, is like it should be a 6 getting up a point up to a 7 for its historical context. So I think a 7 is fair, and that's what I'm going to go with.
Let me point out a couple of points I wanted to make with this film. We have one female character in the entire film.
Who's not written great.
Okay. And of course, the only character to die is the female character. She's a throwaway, because she's not tough enough or smart enough to figure out what's going on. So I think this is a very macho, male dominant film. It was a reflection of the time. And if whether we're starting at 6, as Tom is now saying, which we have not discussed, but that's fine, whatever.
We're discussing it now on mic,
know,
as
on
we
the
should
air.
be.
On the air, that's fine. Because, springing it on me is, about the way you would handle stuff. It's okay. It's fine. I'll just pull some shit out in the future and just go, here you are.
Oh, wait till we get to rewatchability.
Yeah. I actually went down on this from the 7 because of that a little bit, because even though I think it is overall, I think it is a very macho film. And even though it's the 1950s, was kind of playing around from a 7 to a 6.5, but because you've now reduced the baseline, I'll go with my 6.5.
So that's a 7 average between the three of us.
Oh, didn't need any help with the math there, huh?
No. I'm capable of doing a few things in my head. Now, let's get to rewatchability, where here might be some of my more firebombs. I think it's possible we should go back to the original version of this category, which was how easy is this film to watch repeatedly? Because I'll be honest, there are very few things that I am rewatching on a regular basis. Do you want to know who the most watched actor on my Letterboxd was today? You will never in a million years.
Oh man,
You could
I'd like
guess
to. I would
until
like to
Kingdom
guess though.
Come.
I would like to guess though, because this is hilarious. And obviously, I have to think of things that you're being forced to watch. Oh boy, and it is an actor or an actress?
Actress.
Oh, it is an actress. Okay.
Ooh, okay. Because there goes my guess for Ben Stiller.
That wouldn't have been a bad one.
Boy, is it Marion Cotillard?
No, it is not Marion Cotillard.
Okay.
Julia Roberts.
No.
Okay.
You got to think much more insignificant in a franchise that I watch regularly and is a bit part, but carries across multiple different versions of the primary actor.
Jennifer Lawrence?
No, not quite.
I'm out. I had my guess. I put the whole Nolan aspect into it, and that's what I had to say.
It's Lois Maxwell, who plays Moneypenny in the Bond films. Because I think the largest single week of film watching I had this last year was during COVID, when we knocked out a ton of these. But like the Bond films, a bunch of the Marvel films, the Oceans films are like my go-to when I'm sick movies, because I can put those on and it doesn't matter when I wake up. I will still know exactly where I'm at in the movie because I've watched them so many times. Lord of the Rings are like that. It used to be to a degree the Star Wars films, but the more recent trilogies kind of ruined that a little bit for me, particularly Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, so when it comes to just general rewatchability, this is an 80-minute film. It doesn't have too many slow points. It doesn't dip. I do think that the ending is a little bit abrupt in that regard. It doesn't land the plane completely for me. But I do think, given the fact that all three of us have said we enjoyed the film, I was kind of putting it on the list so that I'd have to rewatch it. I think this is about an every year to 2 year kind of return if I wanted to type of film. So in that regard, under that criteria set, that it's not difficult to watch, it's not slow, the runtime isn't too gaudy, you don't have to plan your day around watching it. Frankly, you could probably watch it in between commercial breaks of something. I have a 7.
Okay, can I just do a little mini pitch to you here, Tom? And you don't even have to respond, but just it seems like you're in a little bit of an existential crisis with this category. What if, because you have such a demanding viewership schedule amidst real life, which is also getting real for you these days, as far as managing time and content and whatnot.
You mean when school starts back up on Monday? Yes.
Yeah. What if you approached this category as if, let's say, G-mode ended tomorrow for me, and now movies, I'm not a scheduled podcast viewer anymore, and movies are now for me whenever I want them. Where does Bad Day at Black Rock land for me? Is that a movie I'm going to pick up along the way again? Is Dark Knight something that's going to be a yearly, bi-yearly, 4 times a year watch for me? Am I going to be watch Jaws? Am I going to watch Cat on the Hot Tin Roof? Like, what if you kind of just stepped outside of your current schedule and just said, like, all right, in a world where I can watch whatever the hell I want, where does Bad Day at Black Rock fall in that rewatchable schedule? And again, I'm not looking for an answer, just a thought exercise, as opposed to just being like, there's no way I'm going to rewatch Bad Day at Black Rock again because I physically don't have the hours in the day to do so. Like, what if you did have the hours in the day to do so? How rewatchable would it be? That's just throwing that out there. That being said, I agree with your 7. I find this very rewatchable. I've seen it a lot for a movie I was introduced to 5 years ago. Not a true favorite in the sense that I'm going to go say, you got to see this, you got to see this. But if it's on TCM, I'm at least going to fire it up for a few minutes. I'm going to watch that intro. I'm going to watch him getting introduced to the town, trying to book his room, people hovering around him. If I get to the diner scene, there's no way I'm turning it off. The movie does lose me a little bit to the end, so I'm not always finishing this thing. But I think a 7 is perfectly fair. It's a movie I'd put on a bunch and would keep through it, but not any kind of a favorite beyond that. And the runtime just is real friendly.
There is a specific playlist on my Plex app of Tom's favorites, which is a list that I will occasionally go to and just hit the shuffle button and see what comes up as background viewing for myself. So the original trilogy of Star Wars is in there, Lord of the Rings, a bunch of the different Bond movies, particularly the Connerys and the Craig movies. I believe that the first Dirty Harry movie's in there, Anatomy of a Murder's in there. It's just a selection of all of the ones that I really don't feel like I have to intently watch, but that I enjoy. So if I have to work on a random Saturday and I just need something to put on as background for me, that's going to be in there. And this movie is, as of last year, in that list.
Oh, wow.
So does that help you at all?
Yeah, helps a lot. Yeah. That means
Like,
it's a pretty rewatchable film for you.
Anatomy of a Murder. It's not Rear Window. It's not North by Northwest. It's not like among the favorites, but it's at least in the collection of I can easily background watch this film.
For me, I migrate towards comedy. And from a little kid on, I watched every comedy sitcom of the 60s. And so I'll put on Blazing Saddles. I'll put on Young Frankenstein. I will put on Airplane. That's my comfort food. To this day, if I'm having a rough day or I'm having a day that's been long or I didn't sleep well the night before, I'll crawl into bed and I will put on MeTV and watch the Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, Gomer Pyle,
Hogan's Heroes,
Hogan's
Andy
Heroes.
Griffith, Dick Van Dyke.
Old reruns of Johnny Carson. So, but by the same token, I will also have in my collection.
Are we getting
Patton.
to a number here? Because you're going to get well past what the movie's runtime is.
Okay, so you can go on for 15, 20 minutes, and I can go for 3, and like, you're running on too long. Yeah. Anyway, for rewatchability, I'm at a 6. This is a film that I will rewatch, and it might be that it becomes more in my sphere the more often I watch it. But I mean, North by Northwest is one of my favorite Hitchcock films. I'll rewatch North by Northwest. Dial M for Murder, I'll rewatch. This is not that far out of that sphere, so I can see where I can put it on.
This was a first watch for you.
Yep.
Yeah, and it is like this. The first time you see this, it's a little tricky because you really don't have any idea what the hell's going on. You know, you have an idea of where it's going to go, but character to character, there's a lot of secrecy this movie gives you on. So when you see it a few times, you get a little more involved with where each person's coming from. So
I have a feeling this could very well be within that sphere where, you know, I'm just having a really shitty day and I close my door with the do not disturb and I try to do as much work as I can and throw something on TV, which I've been known to do by throwing Dial M for Murder on or Patton, and just kind of occasionally glance up while I'm trying to work. This might get into that category.
So that is a 6.67 average between the three of us. For audience score, we had a 56% among Google users and an 87% among Rotten Tomato users, giving us a 7.15. So, to repeat the categories, We had a 4.33 for legacy. We had a 6.5 for impact and significance. We had a 6.5 for novelty. We had a 7 for classicness. We had a 6.67 for rewatchability and a 7.15 for audience score, giving us a final total of 38.15, and currently placing it on our list at number 196, right above Rounders and one behind The Terminator.
Oh, the serendipity. Oh, God. Come on. That's someone telling you something that we need to do a Terminator Revisited right there. God.
Wow. I wonder who that could be.
Yeah, who would that be asking us to do that? I don't know.
Oh, the little drummer boy who did the drum roll. I don't know.
Okay.
Honest question. Has there ever been any thought to adding the Letterboxd score into the users? It's tricky because it's out of 5.
Yeah. I've thought about adding a third one in. I thought about IMDb because I thought it might be more reflective than the Google users score. I've thought about various different options. I've never really decided on one, particularly when we have guests on and there's 3 voices. To only have 2 audience scores, I thought wasn't the right thing, but I've never figured out exactly what should be in there. And then it would kind of like change a lot of the other scoring with it potentially.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, it has been considered. We just have never gotten beyond the consideration phase.
Cool.
But if you disagree with any of our scoring, Andrew Corns, you can write us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on our socials at GMOT Podcast, or you can find us on the website RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOT Podcast. Let's move into remaining questions for this one. Why did the townspeople act so suspiciously? Couldn't they have all told a plausible story and let him just simply pass through?
I mean, God, just have you ever walked into the wrong bar before? Where
No, not
just,
really, because
like,
I don't walk into many bars, but fair.
I got a good story here. I walked into a bar in Wisconsin, actually, and
Where?
God, it was by a lake.
That helps.
Yeah.
Well, and they
We had a
have
lake house.
9,000 of them,
I will. I'll get
including
you,
one that's rather a Great Lake. Actually, 2 that are Great Lakes.
yeah, I'll have to do some research on that before we're done here. But
Could you at least name like a cardinal location of the state?
It was a small town. It was a small town
Sure.
bar on a lake, probably about half hour to 40 minutes outside of Milwaukee.
Okay.
And,
All right.
Yeah, and we were with the group, and the first part of the group was me, 2 girls, and someone of a similar stature of me, and we walked in and we were fine. We sat there. The second half of the group, 2 of my friends and my other friend walked in, and the bartender and the locals there were like, "We don't want him in the bar," and it singled out my one friend, and it was just like, and my one friend, he's a big dude. He was. This wasn't a racism thing. We're all very white.
Okay,
but
it was going to ask that.
No, it was not. It was not that at all. No,
There are certain counties in this state where that actually would apply, unfortunately. But yeah,
and this might have been one of them. But he was a larger dude, and they kind of just sized him up, and they were like, no, "We don't think so tonight." And it was just all of a sudden, it was like there's this ruling thing here where they, there can be a vibe where we're going about our Tuesday and we don't want an outsider here today. And I think that's what they were going for in the movie. Clearly, if they're trying to get away with murder, it should be a little more inconspicuous and whatnot from there. And hey, maybe those people in the bar were trying to get away with murder. I might have to reinvestigate this, but yeah. So I don't know. I just think maybe sometimes that's how people act, in that small town vibe.
I don't know. It just feels very CBS procedural to me. You wouldn't have a story, obviously, without it, but it just feels a little neat. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
Alpine Valley around there.
Okay.
Yes, it's East Troy.
Yes, that's exactly the town. It was East Troy. Yep. Yeah, right
Yep.
around there. That was
Yep.
that was.
It's not far from Lake Geneva.
Hmm.
It's not far from my hometown.
All right. My only other question. Is Spencer Tracy too old for this role?
By age, no. By physicality, maybe. I mean, I think a 52-year-old could easily do this role, but the problem is he looks like he's 72 in this. You know?
Well, maybe this
Yeah.
is my ignorance, but how many 54-year-olds were coming out of the war?
More than you'd think.
I guess so. I mean,
especially if he's a master sergeant, you know,
yeah, some type of officer,
a high-level non-commissioned officer. It's not outside of plausibility, but yeah.
If you're a 52-year-old actor playing 42 or playing 40, it works, but he's not that. I tend to kind of think he is too old for the role, but he does a great job. It's a great performance, but in a nitpick world, you should pick a young 52-year-old to play that role, not an old 52-year-old.
Yeah, this is kind of odd that in a modern sense, this would be the role that we'd reserve for like Keanu, who's like 60.
Right. Well, there you go.
Now, for my remaining questions,
now you can get to your nitpicks and your historical inaccuracies and your plot holes.
Okay. First of all,
and we're out of time.
Oh, you bastard!
Sorry, Matt Damon.
Yeah, I'll be quick. First of all, when they're in the internment camps, they knew who the Japanese Americans were. How is it that they didn't figure out that he just disappeared? That they would have made an inquiry. The Pentagon, when they were rounding up Japanese Americans for internment, would have made inquiries. Where is this guy? Where did he go? How did he just disappear? That's number one. Number two, they don't give the frickin' medals to guys and say, here, why don't you go find the family? The Pentagon did that. They had whole groups of soldiers whose job it was to go and try to find families in order to award medals and commendations. So the fact that he's now showing up in this place because, well, I figured the least I could do is come and they don't give you the medal. Okay.
I don't have anything to say to that. I mean, that's that.
No, that feels fine for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I would maybe say go back and read the short story it was based on, because I don't know if it's from like a real life event. And so maybe there is some truth to this, but yeah, I have no obvious objections. This is much better research than anything I did.
It's just years of studying World War II and how things worked and everything else. So
exactly. That's why I'm not challenging you on it, because mine would be completely off base. But anyway, so I do want to give a great big thank you to our now 11-time guest, Mr. Kieran B. Just remind everybody quickly where you are and what you're working on.
Again, happy to be here. Always enjoy carving these little evenings out with you two. It's always fun. Sipping on some on some browns and chatting film with the two of you Duncans. It's always an event for me. I'm at Best Picture Cast, just how it sounds on all of your podcast platforms. Also the social medias, whether it be Blue Sky, Twitter X, Instagram, Best Picture Cast. Pretty easy to find. We're out there. Come check us out. And you can find me on Letterboxd too. My personal Letterboxd account is Kieran B BPC. So check out my watch list. Yell at me about which movie I haven't seen that I should check out. I'm trying to be more active on there and all the socials. It's a regrettable 2025 resolution that I have for myself, but we'll see what we can do with it. But yes, just thanks again for having me on for it.
You can yell at him for not getting to Bull Durham yet on there.
It's true. It's true. It is happening, though. It is coming. I'm trying to sync it up with my dad so we can watch it together because it's a movie he hasn't seen in a long time, if he's truly seen it at all. He does a lot of, I've seen that. But, we get 10 minutes in. He's like, I don't know that I've ever seen this. We watched Dirty Harry. We watched Dirty Harry the other day and got a similar reaction with that. So
we should do a live event with your father and my wife. As to films they think they've seen or they haven't seen, and they have seen or haven't seen.
Nothing was more classic than the day my mother claimed she'd seen Call Me By Your Name, and I said, "Okay, Mom, what's the peach scene?" Oh, but all right,
and that's the funny part is where she'll say, "Well, I've never seen that film. We watched it in the theater together. This is the day that we did it. This is what we did beforehand." And I can remember, going out to dinner and then going to the film and tell you she can't remember a thing.
Now, I do have to ask on behalf of myself and my two other cohorts from last week if you have something to exchange for us.
Oh, so like all three of you to watch a film?
Well, or you could individualize it. I'm perfectly okay with that as well. It might be hard to find something for Andrew, given his massive amounts of film watching.
All right. Well, I got one. I have one for all three of you. I'll pick one for all three of you here, just to simplify it. And I'm pretty sure that the three of you haven't seen this one. Although, like, Sara could wildly have just seen something sometimes.
That's fair. She's got most of us beat on the really deep historical, old films.
I'm curious as to whether Dana is aware of this movie. I'm going Eastwood here. I'm in the Gmote, Gmote avenue here, so I have to do it. It's a little film with Scatman Crothers in there, and it's called Bronco Billy.
Of course I've seen Bronco Billy.
Yeah, let's go, Dana. Yeah, Bronco Billy would be my recommend. It is it's a movie that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it's a fun little play on the end of Westerns and where to go from there. I find it very entertaining and watchable.
So what I will do here is I will offer both of my cohorts either Bronco Billy or The Rookie. And they could...
Oh, please watch The Rookie. Clint's nipple is still my favorite line in the entire history of Gmote.
Yeah, they can watch either of them. But right now, I am not seeing that film listed on Andrew's Letterboxd. So,
yeah, I had a feeling that Corns hadn't seen it, but Sarah's an old soul, so she sometimes I could see her tapping into some of those random movies of past. So
it has been a long time since I've seen it, but I believe, if I remember right, I saw it at the theater.
All right. Well, we'll have to unearth that one here and see where we can find that on the old streaming. But definitely worth the exchange. Now, for anyone who really just does not feel like listening to the last 15 minutes of the podcast, you have my permission at this point to tune out. However, I think this conversation shall be worth your while. Dad, we did a live tweet session where I taught you how to live tweet. And you were very frustrated, but you did so for Juror number 2.
Yes.
First impressions.
First impressions of the film or first impressions of the live tweet? Because I have both.
You do whatever you want. This is open space. Nobody's listening anyway.
All right.
You can't say goddamn on the radio, but...
All right. Let's put it this way. I watched the film. I thought it was very accurate for the first half, clearly. What do I know? I have 150 jury trials to my name. I have tried homicides. I have tried sexual assaults. I did the very first DNA-only sexual assault trial outside of Madison or Milwaukee in the state of Wisconsin. I had attorneys from all over the state coming in and watching this trial. What do I know about trial work? But I apparently, according to one Mr. Corns, don't know what the fuck I'm talking about when I'm watching this film. Okay, good. I'm glad. When you have the level of expertise and knowledge that I do, let me know. So the first half of the film was spot on. And then it went off the rail. And it just got bizarre. And I'm going, huh? What? Where? How? And I had a problem in the last half. If the film would have continued on the way it was at the beginning of the film and continued on that logical progression, I would have thought it was a great film and worthwhile. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, and I do these where 1 to 5 is quality of the film as far as its artistic quality, versus the other half is 1 to 5, it's entertainment and fun. Because I think we get sometimes so caught up in this film world of ours that we lose sight of the fact that some films don't have to be artistic. They have to just be fun, that you just want to have a good time. And so artistically, the first half of the film is about a 3.5, 4 for me. And fun-wise, I'm giving it a 4, 4.5. The last half of the film, artistically, 1.5. And fun-wise, maybe if I weren't a trained lawyer with experience, I would have given it higher marks, but I'm again down to about a 2 on that. So it ultimately comes out to right around a 5 overall for me, because the last half of the movie sucked.
I liked what you said a lot about, not every movie needs to be high art and needs to be hunting for awards and whatnot. I kind of viewed Juror number 2 as a little bit of a callback to his little kind of late 90s section of his career where he was doing 2 movies. True Crime and Blood Work were the 2 movies, and they were just kind of just like fun crime, sort of who done it, where's it go, twist here, twist there. He wasn't trying to get any kind of Oscar nominations or any of that, and I thought it was a fun little throwback to that section of his career. I enjoyed it probably more than most. I drove about an hour to go see it in theaters. It was at a super limited release. So I had to go to Brooklyn to see it. If you went to Brooklyn in a straight line, it would be about a half-hour drive. But of course, traffic and that makes it about an hour and a half. So, and we went to an Alamo Draft House and had an absolute blast. And it was a good experience to me. And I'll be the first person to say when it comes to Eastwood that I'm a fanboy and biased in nature. So take what I say with it in a grain of salt. I had a blast from beginning to end. I thought there was enough of an artistic touch where it was more than just pulp. And, I thought that there was enough in there for it to be considered in some areas of award season stuff, even though I don't feel like this movie needs to be talked about in that way. I didn't have a problem with the second half. I think the movie was kind of a little bit outlandish and plot heavy intentionally, and I dug it. I thought it was really good performances. Holt was great. And, oh God, I hate that I always forget her name, but she's an incredible actress from The Sixth Sense and Hereditary.
Toni Collette.
Toni Collette, yes. A wonderful performance from Toni Collette as well. So I dug it. And I'm sorry you guys didn't because I recommended it to you guys with some clout, some push there. So I'm a little disappointed in myself that I didn't read the room a little better with it, but I'll try better.
I enjoyed the film.
I enjoyed taking the time to do the project, to live tweet it, to have this entertaining event and people following it on Twitter and whatever else. I will let my tweets speak for themselves. If you want my full impressions, you can easily find them. They're not really buried on my profile right now because I don't post a lot personally. And I did from my personal account as opposed to the Gmode account, which in hindsight, it should have probably been coming from the Gmode account. But regardless of that, I did not think particularly highly of the film. I found it a bit preposterous. I found a lot of the acting to be matching the preposterousness of the plot by the end of it. It just kept getting like, to me, it jumped the shark pretty early on, and it kept trying to jump more sharks. But when you get to the end, and some people have said that, like, this is one of the great shots of the year, the scales of justice as she's walking away from the bench and Holt is trying to weigh whether or not he wants to be responsible for this person's death or put this other person as the responsibility. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so ridiculously obvious and ham-fisted.
Over melodramatic.
I do
But
like
if you
people
had-
are out there saying that. That's fun. I agree with you, Tom, but
I thought it was
it's
just
fun
like,
that people are saying that.
yeah, it's so cute for the sake of being cute. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
no,
I agree.
this just, no. It's also a movie I felt was in search of an identity. It's kind of using 12 Angry Men as a backboard for all of this. And so because it's very familiar in some stretches of that, I found that to be like it didn't know what it wanted to be. And then by the end, where for 75% of the film, we're trying to be led in one direction where Holt is supposedly the good guy trying to stand up and do the right thing. And then we kind of have this, well, will he, won't he type of situation where I didn't felt it was deserved to get to that point. I just felt primarily the writing was bad.
I do want to respond to the 12 Angry Men stuff though, because I really viewed that as homage. And this is my backup to it is just that had it been paraphrased, then it's kind of like, come on guys, you're doing the 12 Angry Men thing. But like they were direct quoting it, almost citing it. And there's no way to have a movie called Juror Number 2 by Clint Eastwood to not have people have 12 Angry Men in their mind. And they were direct quoting it, the burden of the proof doesn't lie on the defense, it lies on the prosecution. Like there was direct quote. So I looked at that as straight homage and not like we're leaning on 12 Angry Men to try to give ourselves relevance. Like, and as a viewer, I was watching it like, this could be bad. Like if this continues, like you're just trying to do a cover song of 12 Angry Men. But I think that they got up to that line and it was an homage, a bow down, and then they backed off and went away.
I didn't find that they backed off at all because I felt several of the characters were based solely on characters from 12 Angry Men and then shoehorned into this weird plot. Like I can't remember the actor's name, but I guess for lack of a better term, angry black man.
Yeah, Cedric Jones from
okay.
Reno 911 is what he's from.
Okay.
Yeah.
But is basically the inverted Ed Begley character.
Yeah.
I just found several of these people to be archetypes of 12 Angry Men characters. And by that extension, I'm like, man, this just is, I don't know what you're searching for. Is this supposed to be a honoree film of the original? Is this supposed to be its own thing? Is this supposed to be true crime? It just never, to me, decided on what it was. And because it just kept its fingers in several different categories, it never worked as its own thing.
Cedric Yarborough is his name, by the way. Sorry. Okay. Cedric Yarborough, star of Stalag 47. Gotta fact check myself left and right here.
Okay. See, but for me, the problem comes in that, I put this through my real world filter. Okay. Tom keeps telling me I should do a series of
Reels or TikTok videos.
Yes, where I just go take a show or a movie
Suits.
and just go, let's talk realistically. Okay?
Go episode by episode and just lambast it for how inaccurate it is and how everybody in the entire show would be disbarred.
Let's just put it this way. Yes, the show Suits would last 4 episodes before all of the fucking lawyers would be disbarred
and in jail.
Hey, the USA Network exists as an important part of pop culture. Let's not.
Trust me, I watched all 7, 8 seasons, whatever it was, in its original run, and then I got back into the craze when it became a huge Netflix sensation last year. And I've watched White Collar, I watched Psych, I watched Burn Notice, I watched
Burn
Monk.
Notice, baby.
I still can't finish the final season, but still, I watched all
the
of
final
those shows.
season's incredible. That's the sixth season. The second to last season loses everyone. It's meandering and not good. The seventh season brings it home. Just turn the seventh season on. Forget about the rest of it. Turn the seventh season on and go. You don't need the rest of it for context. If you've never seen Burn Notice before, just turn on season 7 and roll. They crushed it. That's it. Sorry.
Okay.
But either way, yes, all these USA dramas have held a special importance in the Duncan household for a long time. But in the world of police evidence and everything else that's going on, they are not in any way based on anything other than what might be entertaining.
Yeah. That's the USA Network, you know.
It's not just them. Like the Lincoln Lawyer, I'm sure Dad could pick apart. But I think if you had any of this discussion on your bingo card, you have won for the night, and that's a good place to basically finish up. Did you have any other remaining thoughts for the evening, Dad?
No.
Okay. I will say we caught A Real Pain. We caught Wicked, although we might have talked about that a few weeks back. I'm
two of my favorites of the year, right there.
I enjoyed A Real Pain. I think it's really the two primary acting performances, and to go against Mr. Corns directly, as I did on, I think, Twitter or Instagram the other night during the Golden Globes, Culkin is a supporting performance. There is one maybe 30-second piece where we get maybe an entire shot from his perspective, and it's when they're walking and he decides to go talk to the other woman for a minute. Other than that, everything is from the other character's perspective during the entirety of the movie, even at the airport. Everything else is from Eisenberg's perspective during the entirety of the movie. And for me, on my personal rules, it's not necessarily about screen time. It's about perspective. There should be one primary lead character. There can occasionally be two, but perspective and leading a scene is necessary as a quality for me in how I decide what's a lead versus a supporting performance. And while Culkin has a outsized performance because, again, screen time wise, he, if not directly competes with Eisenberg, he might exceed him. And so for some, that would be category manipulation, but because the entire movie is from a different perspective and it's never from him leading the scene, always responding, to me, that's a supporting character.
Yeah, and Tom, we disagreed on this before, specifically with Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal Lecter. But I think if you look at it with Real Pain, who's the constant and who's the variable? And the constant is Eisenberg, and the variable is Kieran Culkin. And to me, if you want to just simplify it as that, is like, what is the through line and what is the person impacting the through line? And it's pretty simple there.
Yeah, it's to me, it's Eisenberg's story, but it's the impact of Culkin on him.
Right. There it is.
So,
yeah. Great film, though. Great film.
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed it tremendously.
Yeah.
But thank you very much for being with us this week. Thank you for listening. All right, Bub, your fucking head is coming right off. Next week, we welcome back returning guest Adam Vanderwerf to discuss MASH from 1970. Directed by Robert Altman, written by Ring Lardner Jr., music by Johnny Mandel, starring Donald Sutherland, Elliot Gould, Tom Skerritt, and Robert Duvall. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you.
That's REELGOOD.
Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at thenewRonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GMODPodcast. Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.